Hello?
Hi, this is Jovan with Bullet Music.
Hey, how are you?
Good,
Thank
how
you
are
so much
you?
for calling me back. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you for taking
Cool.
the time to chat with us today.
No problem, no problem.
So I've heard you're pretty incredible on stage, and I actually just listened to your entire solo album, Liminal, yesterday and today.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Thank you so much.
First and
Wow.
foremost, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you started playing music?
Yeah, so I've always played, well, not always, but I started playing the cello when I was 6. And I played classically pretty much until the time I was about 16 or 17. I played with a classical instructor. And then was almost going to stop, but I was asked to play a kind of classical senior recital for my string director at the school that I attended, and ended up doing a 20-minute concerto in front of his professional orchestra, and that was a big moment for me that you think might have encouraged me to continue playing. But actually, after that concert, I was content to kind of put the instrument down and to move on to other things. However, I took the instrument to Morehouse and just played in the string ensemble there. It was kind of a collection of non-majors who played, and it was at that moment that I ran into a buddy of mine who was on the balcony of his dorm room playing Stone Temple Pilots on his guitar. And I was just kind of loitering outside of his dorm room listening to him play, and he kind of came out and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm listening to you play." He said, "That's kind of creepy." I had my cello with me, strangely, because I just came back from string ensemble. And he said, "You can't stay out here and listen, but if you want to take your cello out and play along with me, that'd be great." And I was reluctant, because it's classical music, and I didn't really think that there was an easy vector into that contemporary world. But he convinced me. I took my cello out. About 20 minutes later, I had a part to Stone Temple Pilots' song Plush. About 2 hours later, I had 2 cello parts, the 2 originals that he wrote, and a week later we were a band, and 2 weeks later we had our first gig. And that opened up a brand new kind of personal and career opportunity or path for me that in some way I've been on since, and that was probably 1994. And that's kind of it. There's a lot of other individual landmarks along the way, but the beginning of me playing contemporary music is probably 1994.
That's amazing. I would have loved to have heard that Stone Temple Pilots. Do you happen to have any of those available?
There is on my YouTube channel, there is a video of us doing, I think, Plush. At one point I was trying to make a film, and I was shooting a pitch video, they ended up using a piece of us playing to promote it. But I'm pretty sure on either Okorie Johnson, Okorie Johnson, or Ok Cello on YouTube, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's probably a video of us playing.
Cool.
It's a little old, and it's before I kind of stepped off into doing the solo cello thing, but I think it would be a pretty faithful representation of how we played it back in 1994.
I'm going to try to find that and then
Cool.
put it in this interview. That'd be awesome.
Thank you.
What does a day in the life of Ok Cello look like before and after a show?
Wow. Let's see. Day in the life before a show. I'm married. I have 2 little girls, and a lot of my life is still very domestic. So every weekday, I wake up in the morning and get my youngest off to school. Depending upon what else I do, I used to be an English teacher at a prep school in Atlanta, and some days I still go in and help out with the diversity department, but I'm not working full time, and I'm not in the classroom the way that I was anymore. But some days I'll be there. But very frequently I wake up and practice for a couple of hours, and then do some music administrative stuff. That's on a day that I don't have a show. On a day that I have a show, I'll definitely be practicing and get to a sound check or load in. That's usually around 2 or 3. And then shows are usually around 7 or 8 or 9. Load in, sound check around 3 or 4, and then show. I mean, the logistics of playing of getting a show on are actually pretty mundane. And sorry, I dropped my phone.
Oh,
not unlike, probably any other job. checklists and making sure you have everything, and buddy, it was fun. But Other than that, that's it. I think what I'm more excited about, it's not so much the shows. I really enjoy the shows. I enjoy the being in the company of an audience and kind of creating an experience together. But there are those moments on a random Wednesday where, you know, I'm plugged up and I've been playing for about 2 hours and I stumbled onto something new. And I'm even afraid to kind of talk about it, but it's not uncommon for me to stumble onto something that kind of makes me tear up. And I usually use that as the litmus test for whether I have something that needs to be developed. So that's kind of what my life is like.
Yeah, that last thing you said kind of leads into the next two questions I have. Before embarking on the creation of Liminal, did you have a plan or did it come together naturally?
No, you know what's funny? Are you talking about the song or the album?
The album.
The album. Everything is in my life. I need to maybe switch gears, but everything in my life musically over the last 2 or 3 years has been really happenstance. The album is a production of a buddy of mine who came to a couple of my shows who has a recording studio. He's like, I love what you do. It's absolutely amazing. What are your plans for recording? And I said, you know, I haven't really made any plans. He's like, well, I'm your plan now. So just come to my studio every Monday night as many times as you can, and let's see if we can get this album made. And essentially the songs on Liminal are major kind of foundational pieces from my early show, which was called Epiphany, EPI.PHONY, which was really an exploration of this musical late-breaking idea that I had that, one, I could communicate with people with just my cello and tell stories, and two, that the cello was a much more important voice than I had formally kind of recognized. So that show, Epiphany, was something that happened in the year 2015. I performed one show every month for the year, and it was at one of those shows that this gentleman, his name is Alfredo Isaac, it was at one of these shows that he said, I'm going to be the guy to help you record this album because I think the music here is great and people need to hear it. So that's kind of what happened, and in some ways even the song order, the song list was something that was to some degree reactionary to how I was playing my shows. I very frequently started off my shows with 40, and I think 40 is the second song, but I decided not to go with 40 as the first song. I went with Surrender primarily because it had a kind of a tempo that I think I wanted to establish for the rest of the album.
That one's my favorite. I really enjoyed and connected to that, to Surrender.
Thank you. I also feel that what's interesting to me about Surrender is that maybe even more so than 40, it is an example of several influences coming to bear. So I never get away from the classical because I play the cello, so it's always going to be there. But the beginning of Surrender is kind of, for me, this kind of West African interpretation of a drum rhythm. And that West African rhythm continues to kind of beget other polyrhythms, other West African rhythms. And so in some ways, that song conjures up something that might be kind of maybe an homage to something that is a Malian, M-A-L-I, West African piece. I'm not particularly versed in West African classical music, but from time to time, I do enjoy taking West African dance classes, and the people who teach those classes are usually very versed in kind of the origin of the rhythms and the origin of the ceremonies associated with these rhythms. And when I was coming up with Surrender, I think all of that was just kind of swimming around in the ether of that creativity for me. So I liked it as a first song, one, because it's clearly classical, it's clearly kind of a Western expression and tradition, but it also finds this, I think, organic and somewhat seamless blending with something that is West African, which for me seems to be a really important intersection for American music, which is a really important intersection for my personal life and for my musical life.
Is there a main story does each of your songs tell a story, or is there a main story thesis?
You know, it's funny. I don't think there is a main through line yet, but I think the second album I'm working on may have one. However, each story I like to imagine, this is certainly doing a little bit more than just kind of putting an album together. But I used to be an English teacher, and while I'm not necessarily an expert on the entire collection of stories by James Joyce, I'm pretty sure the name of that collection of short stories is Dubliners. And the kind of organizing principle behind Dubliners is that these were like, maybe they're 8 or 10. I don't know how many short stories there are. But they're all individual short stories. But they all take place in the same world, in the same neighborhood, and some of them with the same characters. And while there's no direct through line, there's no beginning, middle, end plot that centers around one community or one family, these short stories tell the world of Dublin, or they illustrate the world of Dublin at a particular time. I'd like to imagine a similar organizing structure for my album Liminal, and I don't think that these songs all are directly beginning, middle, end connected, but as with Liminal as a kind of an operating definition or a guiding principle, liminal means at the intersection of borders or in the in-between spaces. It's one of those words that has been hiding in plain sight for, all of our life because we've been saying things like subliminal, which is the intersection of the conscious and the unconscious mind. Well, I feel like my life has been that. It's been living not so much in the margins, but in the intersections of somewhat disparate communities, black, white, urban, suburban, sports and music, or classical and contemporary. And I feel like that first album of mine, Liminal, those individual stories tell what it's like to live in that space. And so that's kind of how I organize it. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, actually. I'm an English major as well, and I've been working on, trying to work on a novel, and when I listened to Liminal today and yesterday, and the song Surrender specifically put me right into the middle of it. Just illustrated, it came right into my mind and helped me form, a chapter. So now I'm probably going to go home, listen to that song, and write the chapter. So I totally get that.
Thank you. So I'm excited. Excited to maybe one day read what you write too.
Yeah, well, music is so amazing, and you've scored music for trailers and some other projects. What's your favorite part about working on requests like those?
Yeah, I really enjoy having no limitations, just walking into my living room and playing. However, I think some of the pieces that I'm most excited about are pieces that have given me constraints. What's interesting about Surrender is that while all of that was swirling around with the whole West African ether, the kind of primordial ooze for that song, I was also working in collaboration with another cellist, and we were writing a suite, a 3-song suite. We collaborated on the second part of the suite. She wrote the first, and I wrote the third. And we were supposed to identify surrender as the idea that inspired the music. And not so much surrender in the kind of belligerent, bellicose, warlike way of surrender, you're done, but more surrender to the possibilities or the suggestions or the trajectory that you happen to be on because it's taking you to a powerful place. And so it was out of spending a lot of time talking with her about the word surrender, and it was specifically about our deciding that third piece would be a really interesting blending of 2/3. So, the boom, 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 bum, boom, 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 bum, boom, bum, boom, bum, boom, bum, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. It's kind of a 3. And then on top of that, I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Those two elements were things that we talked about that we wanted this third piece to just have. And that constraint created, I think, the first clearly narrative voice of that album and of that show. And so while I don't do so well at putting constraints on myself, I do enjoy having to solve a problem, having to solve a creative problem, and specifically if that problem is connected to identifying the emotional essence of a moment or a character or a visual or of a concept. And I enjoy that. That's perhaps my favorite kind of problem to solve.
And you've kind of spoken to this already. Are your creative decisions sometimes shaped by the things happening in the world today and cultural differences, things like that?
Yeah. I have a couple of songs that will be on this new album coming up that are direct response to the difficulty that we as a country have been experiencing around race, around police, appropriate policing, around police brutality, around a kind of an adolescence of this, an adolescence for this country that is able to both include and sustain all varieties of perspectives and ethnicities and cultures and races. There are two songs I'm talking about. One is Incredulous, which was a song I wrote after the Charleston, South Carolina church massacre. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is called West Wind, which is a kind of intellectual but musical exploration of the fact that there sometimes are dominant perspectives, dominant ways of seeing the world that are fighting for dominance but haven't quite clearly established it. And so in the song West Wind, again, a song that'll be on the second album, I've got this song from Block Party, and I've sampled the initial drum and voice section of that song, and I've layered over top of it this kind of minor foreboding world. And then I have three melodies that everyone will recognize: We Shall Overcome, You Are My Sunshine, and DJ Khaled's I'm So Hood, that I weave through that world as a way of identifying that these are melodies that capture our ear, that we want to listen to, that we identify with in some way, but that don't necessarily fit the world that we're in. And I've associated, at least when I talk to my audience, three different perspectives that are represented by that song. So We Shall Overcome, which is the kind of the sweet but somewhat overly simple understanding that emerges from the civil rights movement that we're all going to figure this out. You Are My Sunshine, which is a complicated song to talk about because for some people it has very sweet, innocent memories, and it conjures up great memories. But it was also used in the South as a song that united segregationists, and it was kind of like a musical dog whistle for a particular kind of politics that excluded people of color, particularly black people. And DJ Khaled's I'm So Hood, which is also one of those songs that has a certain kind of anthem quality to it, but doesn't necessarily present a full picture for a complicated world that moves forward with everyone. And I put these three melodies in complement but also contrast with that kind of minor world because they're all major melodies. I put them in contrast with that minor world, but then in addition to that, I kind of weave them into one melody to show that, maybe a more livable possibility is that somehow they come together. But unfortunately, I don't have a studio recorded version of that song yet. But yes, a lot of the songs that I write are directly related to kind of what's happening around.
I'm going to kind of jump the gun here because, talking about your second album, when can the world expect that or be on the lookout for it?
That's a really dangerous question. I can tell you that I'm trying to get something done for the end of the year, beginning of 2018. I am not honestly on track for that. So I only have, like 2 songs out of the 10 I'm trying to release recorded. So I'm really trying to sprint towards the end of the year. But I think I can honestly say that 2018 will see a second project from me. I'm not sure whether it's the beginning of 2018 or the middle of 2018, but it will definitely see a second project for me. And I'm still toying around with kind of an overriding concept and name. I've got a couple that I really like and that I'm kicking around, but not 100% sure yet.
Well, after hearing about, your three main ideas for the the three songs, I definitely am on the edge of my seat. So
Yeah.
can't wait for that.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
What do you find easier, stage performance or studio work, talking about coming up with that second album?
Oh, I definitely find performance easier. I find performance easier might not be the right word, gratifying. I don't find playing in a studio not gratifying, but it doesn't give you the same feedback, right? Because you're playing into like a vast blackness, a vast whiteness. You're trying to fill that space up, and you don't really get feedback on how you're filling it up until really the project is done. But what I love about an audience is that when you are sharing something with people, you're very rarely just sharing something that is specific to you. You're also sharing something that you and the audience are creating in real time, especially because a lot of my music tends to be improvisational. There are no songs really that are played the exact same way every single time. There are parts of songs that are built similarly with each show. But a big part of what I attempt to do when I'm performing is to improvise. And so that improvisation is always informed by who's in the audience and how they're reacting to it and how I'm feeling and how they're feeling. And in addition to that, I have some features that are not quite songs or more experiments in my set, which are really designed to create audience interaction. Like there's a busking set where I literally put out a box and I busk and I improvise and try and get people to put money in the box. That's always fun. I do a kind of sometimes audience-assisted improvisation. And then the third thing I do is something called story time, which is I play a progression. I invite the audience to close their eyes and to imagine a setting or a protagonist. And then I improvise over that chord progression, and I have them watch the movie unfold in front of their eyes with their eyes closed. And then at the end of that song, I have them share with everyone else there in the audience the story that they saw happen. And so I just really love those moments because you never know what you're going to hear. People are almost always a little shy to share it first, but then there's never enough time to hear all the stories. And it becomes this thing that the audience and I have produced together. You know, it's not me saying this is the song and I hope you guys like it. It's all of us creating this experience together, and these individual stories become personal, but the fact that they've been shared becomes really communal too. So I love playing in front of audiences. It's a big deal for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a show that I would love to see. You coming to Nashville anytime soon?
Possibly. I do have some friends in Nashville, and from time to time I find myself there. I'm talking with that cellist I was talking with earlier about maybe trying to do something that will be a music festival in Nashville, in the summer of 2018, but I'm not sure that we're definitely committed to doing that. But there is a woman that I play with. Her name is Callahan, and she, as of recently, has been kind of based in Nashville. So I have been a couple times over the last couple of years, but I haven't done a solo show there yet. So if Bullet is able to drum up enough interest, I would love to be invited to do a solo show in Nashville if you guys were interested in helping me to facilitate that.
Absolutely. We will definitely journey down that road, and
cool.
Looking forward to it. This is my last question, and it's kind of a silly question.
Mm-hmm.
If your music were an animal, what kind of animal would you say it would be?
Wow, my music were an animal, what kind of music would it be?
Or what kind of animal would your music be?
Yeah, what kind of animal my music would be? Well, I'm going to start with the adjectives first. I think that the music is moving. It can be really moving. I think when it works well, sometimes people come up to me and say that they were crying and they weren't 100% sure why. I think it can be fun, too. I don't know that I would say that it is entertaining first. I think if I had to order the intentions, it would be, I'm hoping to be moving and enlightening first. I'm probably hoping to be really honest. Well, maybe I'm trying to be honest first. And then I want to be moving second. And then I want to be engaging third. And maybe as a part of being engaging, I want it to be entertaining. So an animal that is honest, enlightening, and engaging. I mean, I think of something like an owl.
Yeah, that's
or or like some kind of like an, I don't know. This is not right. Albatross. I don't know. That's but something that I think I like the idea of a bird that flies high as an inverse image of music taking you deep. So I like that.
That's a beautiful picture, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk with us today.
No problem. So is this going to be just text, or are you also going to try and find some pieces to some audio pieces to kind of fill out the interview? Is that right?
Yeah. So basically, I'm gonna put it into text in an article, but inside the article, I will make sure to include some hyperlinks that will hyperlink to your website. It'll hyperlink to your YouTube and maybe your Spotify or your SoundCloud, iTunes, some of those things, and just to try and get people to hear some of the songs. Like I might put one of your YouTube videos that you've done, or like for your project and trailers, and I'll get creative with it.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so excited. How soon do you think you'll have it out?
So I'm going to work on it today, and depending on our publishers and editors' schedule, it could go out by Friday. Okay.
Well, I am so excited and so honored and thankful that you thought to interview me, and I would just look forward to seeing a little link to it when it's ready.
Absolutely. I'll send it to you, and we were honored to talk with you, and I really enjoyed hearing about you and your experience as a performer, composer, and creator.
Thank you so much. And tell me say your name, first name for me one more time.
Sure. It's Jovan. It's spelled Jovan.
Yes, Jovan. All right. Such a pleasure talking with you, Jovan.
You as well. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.